Okay, so good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about bridging the veteran employment gap from forces to finance. You can expect an hour panel discussion with some veterans and a live Q&A throughout. Bit of an introduction to myself before we go on to our panelists. My name is Connor Nurse. I'm the team lead at Broadgate Staffing. Broadgate, we're a B Corp certified business, which incorporates various community groups to reach an underrepresented and diverse audience. One of our groups is our social enterprise called Ex-Military Careers, and its mission is to find meaningful employment for all veterans. Our goal, bridging the gap from the military to a civilian career. With over 200,000 followers on LinkedIn, we host industry thought leadership events to support veteran employment initiatives. We want to make the discussion as engaging as possible, so if you have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the side panel or in the Q&A section, and we will get through as many of these as possible. Lastly, before we kick things off, please note this is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also access our previous webinars. Now I'd like to introduce you to our fabulous panel, and we'd also love to know more about our audience, so please do tell us where you are located throughout the world in the chat box. Now over to our panel. Can you give us a quick introduction into yourself and your professional journey so far? Annie, I don't know if you want to kick us off, and then we can go to Juan and Ryan.
Sure, thanks, Connor. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Pena. I am a managing director at Standard Chartered Bank. I have been here for the past 10 years. My military service, I was active duty in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years. I was an aircraft mechanic, so I would say a little bit of a career change from aircraft mechanic to financial services. So very excited to hear from all of you today, and over to Juan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Vasquez. I'm a managing director and a senior information security officer with State Street, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. My military background, I did 17 years with the Marine Corps, made it to E7 gunnery sergeant. And then I've been with the Navy Reserve now for 2 years as an officer, currently lieutenant, junior grade, and happy to be here. I'm going to try to give you my perspective when it comes to finance and also how to get into tech within the finance sector. Over to you.
Thank you, Juan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ryan Powell, and I'm a vice president at Fulbright Bank. We're a small bank located in the Washington, D.C. area. And my background at Fulbright is specifically within business continuity and operational resilience. Prior to that, in the military, I was an ordnance officer right after I did ROTC in college. I spent 5 years in active duty Army, got out and I did the National Guard for about a year in Virginia. And I've been in the financial services sector ever since.
Thank you very much, Annie, Juan, and Ryan. Really looking forward to today's discussion. To discuss our first talking point, really, we're going to look back to look forward. So looking back on leaving the forces for the first time, is there something that you wish you knew then that you now know? Annie, I don't know if you want to go first for this one and see if there's one specific thing that sticks out for yourself.
Sure, I can go first. If I was to look back when I first left the service, one thing that I wish I would have known is how important it is to build a new network. I think a lot of us, at least for me, I joined the Marine Corps right after high school. I didn't have the benefit of having that network of colleagues that went to college together and are now working across many different industries and many different companies. So for a lot of us coming out of active duty, our entire network is essentially other active duty members, other military members. So when you're stepping in and trying to find a civilian job, it can be very difficult if you don't start building those relationships, if you don't make networking a priority. So I think that piece I was missing, and I struggled tremendously because I wasn't aware of that.
Fantastic, thanks, Annie. And I know that's definitely something we're gonna touch on later in the webinar. So it's interesting that you brought that up. Ryan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one. I think if I really understood the value of having a good mentor, and it's somebody that you can that understands where you've come from, because a lot of times your backgrounds or experiences are different, but somebody that can be open and honest and give good feedback, and feedback in a way that's meaningful, and not just your performance, but also how you can grow your career, thinking and more of a long term, what you want your career to look like within the next year, 3 to 5 years, 10 years. And then also kind of helping you coach through what your expectations are in a job. What do you find fulfilling? Like those are the things that you can have a meaningful conversation with in a mentor, and in an atmosphere that would, help build trust, and you could be honest. So that would be my thing.
Interesting. And is that just a mentor? Do you mean someone else who is a veteran, or
No,
any
not
kind of mentor?
necessarily. Yeah, because sometimes and I will say this, it's gonna be sometimes hard to find a person that ticks all those boxes in your, let's say in the financial world, that is also a veteran, right? Now, when you do, that would be fantastic. But it would, similar to Annie's point, that mentor might help open other doors, and they might not have to be a veteran, but you can still be in a good place, and get good feedback, and good mentorship advice, even if they're not, but it could be in the civilian world.
Yeah.
Just is a gold star if they're a veteran too, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's vitally important. I don't think it's stressed enough to anyone, to be honest with you, early in their career. Juan, what about yourself?
I think for me, it's realizing what we're fortunate and what we're privileged to when it comes to the experience and the atmosphere that we work in. It took me a while to understand, and I always tell people, I give them this example when I interview and they ask me about my experience when it comes to leading people or projects. And I tell people all the time that I was 22 years old, and as a sergeant, I had 40 plus people under me. I was managing millions of dollars of equipment, and I was managing these people and processes and technologies in an environment that was very stressful when we were forward deployed, right? So to me, like one of the things that is key is understanding all that experience that you bring from the military and how to make sure you communicate it the right way. Because I think a lot of the times, as veterans, we don't do a good job of making sure that people understand the things that we've achieved, right, and the things that we're capable of. So that's one of the things I would have hoped to realize sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, it took me more than 10 years to realize that. But nonetheless, like I said, that's one of the things I always give my veterans advice on is make sure you understand all the skills and all the knowledge and all the experience you bring as a veteran, because it's a power and it's a strength that you bring all of that, and you're such an asset to an organization. And as soon as you can clearly articulate that, they'll be fortunate, and you'll be an asset to any organization. So like that's one of the things I wish I would have learned earlier in my career, but thankfully now I'm in a position to tell everyone on this call that those are the things that they should be focusing on as well.
Completely. Yeah, it's about, how you translate that experience on a resume and in interviews, and what opportunities are out there, which is all stuff we're going to go delve deeper into later on into the webinar. So thank you for that. Moving on, we're going to have our first poll, in terms of looking at what specific skills and experiences make veterans well suited for roles in financial services, which should be coming up. Now, I believe. Is that coming up? It should be coming up. It should be coming up now. Oh, there we go. We've got it. Here we go. So what specific skills and experiences do you believe make veterans well suited for roles in financial services? So we've got A, leadership and teamwork, B, discipline and resilience, C, problem solving and adaptability, D, all of the above, and E, other. Please specify. And once we get some answers to this, we'll ask our panelists their thoughts and on, I guess, the answers and more broadly what they think. So please, yeah, fill in one of the answers below, dependent on what you feel. So it looks like we got all of the above as the most, which is great to see. Keen to kind of turn to Ryan now. What would your answer be to this question? What do you feel in terms of skills and experience that veterans have that make them well suited to financial services?
Yeah, I'll follow along with that poll, and I created two buckets when I was thinking through this. The first one is what I call your common or your most talked about things. It's kind of a caveat to what Juan was mentioning, right? Like your teamwork, that is something that will always be of value, and you can always put out there, and how you can articulate that. The discipline that goes like along with goal-oriented or focused type of mentality, your flexibility and adaptability, your leadership capabilities, all of that stuff once you can articulate those stories, and especially if you were in a forward deployed or a hazardous situation, that's all absolutely gold for somebody trying to find a civilian job. The other side that I will say that is almost sort of overlooked or uncommon is that you're highly trainable. And I don't think that is something that is uh, expressed enough, right? Like a lot of times veterans, regardless of rank or branch affiliation, you're put into a many jobs that you might not be completely trained for. And it's usually the type of situation when I talk to folks, it's always like, well, they threw me in and I had to go learn it. And I don't think that is discussed enough when you're coming into the civilian workplace. Another one is that you're used to working in a highly regulated industry. It is absolutely transferable when you get into the civilian, especially financial services, when you can explain how you're used to abiding by regulations, standards, procedures. There is a clear, distinct, path for each area that you've worked in. We do that in the financial services sector as well. The auditors and regulators are very explicit in what you can and cannot do. And again, there's only another one. It's healthcare that's regulated just like finance. And then the other one is that I think, again, overlooked is that you're used to working in a very diverse atmosphere and diverse work colleagues. You never know once you get to a unit who you're going to be, walking into, what the jobs are going to look like, that your coworkers are going to look like. It is a very valuable skill to be able to work and develop relationships with people from all different backgrounds. And again, that's something that's overlooked, and in my opinion, and I think that you could bring that up when you are talking with potential employers.
Yeah, I think three very, very good points there. The highly regulated sector factor is a really good point, and the diversity and almost the adaptability, I think, is a really good point there as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else, Juan or Annie, you have anything to add to that at all?
I would just add a little bit on the adaptability point, Connor. And I think a lot of people really undervalue that and the flexibility. Companies are constantly going through restructurings, through changes in technology. It's change is constant. The only thing that is guaranteed is that whatever company you're working for is going to go through some kind of very significant change year after year. And having employees who are able to adapt quickly, who are able to remain flexible and move along with the change is something that it's very difficult to find, actually. And I think veterans do that quite well, and they can definitely add value in that space.
Fantastic. Yeah, completely agree. Juan, is there anything you'd like to add to that point?
Yeah, I would add that I think that many of us are fortunate to join the military and gain some technical skills, right? So not all of us, right, were grunts or working in the infantry. Like many of us have had technical jobs, and so I think it's important to highlight not only those intangible skills like communicating and being a team player and leadership, but all the technical skills that you've gained throughout your experience in the military, right? Like we have, as an example, one of the panelists was an aviation mechanic. It is a very technical job that requires, very technical skills. I've had a lot of veterans that, in the military were technical, and they were like system administrators or they were network administrators. And, when they get out into the civilian world, they have they have a problem translating that because they don't understand the fact that they've gained all those technical skills while they were in the military, and they might not have the formal training, or they might not have gone to school, or might not hold a certification, but they have all the experience, knowledge that is required, right, to hold very technical jobs. So I think it's important to make sure we highlight both, right? Highlight your non-technical skills, and then highlight all the technical skills you've gained.
Completely. Yeah, I think that's sometimes something that is forgotten about. Soft skills are obviously very, very important, but you need to make sure you outline what technical skills you did gain when you served. We have a question through from the audience. What steps can veterans take to adapt to the corporate culture and terminology in the finance space? Great question, this one. I'm not sure who wants to tackle this. Ryan, do you want to tackle this? Annie?
I can jump in. And I think someone mentioned earlier around mentorship. And it's so critical that you find people, and you will find people are very willing to help, right? People like to spend time guiding, either talking about their careers and how they got there, providing feedback. But the reality is, when you're coming in as a veteran, there's a lot that you need to learn about how the corporate world works, right? How do you talk to your manager about getting a raise? How do you how do you network and find other opportunities within the same company? How do you progress in your career? How do you raise your hand for leadership opportunities and things of that nature? It's very different from the Marine Corps, right? For me, right? You run a good PFT, you shoot well in the rifle range, and you show up every day, and you're breathing, and you stick around long enough, you're going to get promoted, and everyone knows how that works. But in the corporate world, there's no manual, there's no rule book that tells you this is how things work. I remember starting my first job and asking someone, I think the first day, like, okay, where's the manual that tells us how we're supposed to do things? And they're like, there's no manual, you just figure it out. And I'm standing there looking around like, so how does everyone know what they're supposed to do? As an aircraft mechanic, you have these very prescriptive books that tell you every single step of what you're supposed to do. So having the mentors, and mentors is a very, I'll say, formal word. Finding someone within the organization that you can relate to, someone who's willing to help you and guide you is very important. You can't do it alone. That's all I can say.
Yeah, completely. So someone who's trying to find someone, although it is difficult, who's gone through something similar, a similar kind of transition. Almost have like a buddy system internally. We found with some of our clients who have veteran hiring schemes can be really, really effective. Ryan, Juan, I don't know if you have any other additional points to that.
The other thing I'll point out is that don't if you do get hired onto a specific firm or a bank somewhere, don't get discouraged if the terminology, it feels like a waterfall, because for one thing, a lot of times acronyms are different from organization to organization. And so it's very confusing if you even move from civilian workplace to another. So in a lot of times I always joke, like, there should be and some companies do, they have like a glossary of terms that is just acronym specific to their company. But again, it gets back to that, if you're getting a little tactical here, again, finding somebody to, like Annie mentioned, it doesn't have to be a mentor, but a buddy, somebody that might be your peer that you can lean in on and be like, hey, I have this project, or I'm working on this. They said, what does this mean? What do you know? And then the other side of it is, don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's the worst you could do, is go along and not and pretend like and then you're stuck into a situation where you don't know what they're talking about. So again, it's okay to raise your hand, say it. Hey, you want to explain this to me? And a lot of times, again, people are more than willing to talk about themselves and the project that they're working on and give you that information.
Yeah, be inquisitive, I think, is
Yep.
be inquisitive. Don't be afraid to to ask a question that may seem a silly question to you, but probably lots of other people are thinking the same thing, right? Who've been in a similar situation.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for that question from the audience. Moving on to, I guess, the financial services industry, the finance industry as a whole.
No.
Obviously, Juan, sorry.
Can I add one thing on that culture question?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, Juan.
So the one thing I wanted to make sure, the audience understood, is that culturally you'll adapt to the cultured environment, right? You'll quickly understand, how to speak to folks, how to speak to your manager, how to adapt to that, right? Because veterans are good at adapting. I think one of the things that is key that's made me successful is I've never lost sight of the fact that I hold the same mentality and the same ethics when it comes to my military life. I hold myself to the same standards in the civilian world and in my corporate job, because it's made me successful not to have that 9 to 5 mentality like many people in the corporate sector do. So in the military world, we live by and die by mission accomplishment. And if you apply the same principles in corporate America, like, you can be very successful, because you'll think different than others and you will perform different than others. And not having that 9 to 5 mentality can get you a long way. So I just want to make sure that veterans don't lose sight of the fact that they gain culturally a lot of good values in the military, and you should apply some of those to the civilian sector and corporate sector, because that'll make you successful.
Completely agreed. Yeah, excellent additional point, Juan. And we'll move to you to the next question as well, which is, obviously we've got panelists here who all work in finance and financial services, obviously in very different capacities. So what kind of opportunities and roles are available in the broader sense, and how do they apply to veteran skill sets?
Yeah, this is an awesome question, because many people think that because you work for a financial institution, you work for a bank, like, you have to be finance focused or accounting focused. And it's actually more broader than that, right? Like, of course, the business end, there's a lot of finance and accounting folks and, marketing folks, but the financial sector, the financial banks, like, many people don't know this, but the financial sector and the big banks actually invest more in technology than the Googles and the Metas of the world, right? When I worked at JP Morgan, our technology budget was $12 billion. And so when you look at a financial institution, just don't think I need to be in finance, or I need to be in accounting, or I need to be in marketing. If you have a tech itch, the financial sector can definitely scratch it, because I've been fortunate enough to work for now a couple of financial institutions. And once you understand the finance sector and you understand how they operate, but you have like a technology background, or you have a unique background like in marketing, or as Ryan has it in business continuity and disaster recovery, like, you have so many opportunities, not only within your own institution, but to go to other institutions, because most of the financial institutions, they actually acquire talents from each other. Like, I worked at JP Morgan, so I was recruited from JP Morgan to State Street. One day I might be recruited from State Street to, Bank of America, and so on. So my point is, think of it more broadly than just, I need to be in the finance sector, I need to be in finance and accounting. There's so many more opportunities beyond that.
Completely agreed. And yeah, I think it's a great point and an excellent question in that sense. There's so much different opportunities available for people of different skill sets within the industry. I mean, Annie and Ryan, I don't know if you have anything in addition to add to that.
If I can add, Connor, there's also the opportunity to move internally, right? Once you are within a company and they have invested in you and they see the potential and the talent, you have many, many opportunities that would not be available to you if you were an external hire. So I'll use myself as an example. I joined the bank in our financial crimes compliance team. I was an intelligence analyst as my first role. After doing that for a few years, I moved over to our client coverage team, and now I am leading our middle office operations for all of the Americas. So I've gone from financial crime compliance to client coverage to operations. So all within one institution. So a lot of times you have to, whatever opportunity you get to get your foot in the door and come into a company, learn the business, network with others, learn different areas, and you might even land in an area that you might not have initially thought that you were interested in. So it's always like having an open mind and continuing to explore and to learn, and those opportunities will come.
Completely, yeah, an excellent point, because the businesses are so much bigger usually. There's far more opportunity.
And I'll add in real quick on that one to Annie's point. A lot of times about movement with internal movement. don't be afraid to look at different sizes of companies. And I say that because like I've worked at big financial firms, a mid-sized bank, and now I'm with a smaller bank. A lot of times in those mid to smaller companies, you get to wear those hats or more than one hat and get involved in more than one project. And so when you're looking at initially, you want to try and find those jobs, like the question was asking, like, hey, what is transferable from my current job into the job that they're looking to hire for? That's the immediate goal, right? But then once you get in, a lot of times those smaller shops, they might be growing and they might need people just to lean in and learn. And again, showing that adaptability, the way that you're approaching a team, a project, whatever, you can put on another hat and you can gain another skill set that could be valuable somewhere else. To Juan's point, and you might, there might be a need somewhere else in another company that might look for you.
Completely, yeah. Yeah, all very very key points from that, and thank you for your insights. I think we're moving on to our next poll. We want to bring that up. Where do you typically look for job opportunities that match your skill set and experience? So we've got a few different options here. So job boards, networking events, LinkedIn, company websites, or referrals from colleagues, or other, please specify. So again, we'll run through, the answers with our panelists after this. We can all vote on that, and then we can have a discussion after. Everyone wants to get their votes in. So we've got a bit of a mixture really here. This is quite interesting actually. Yeah, panelists. I don't know what we've got 2 out of 6 for job boards. So that's 33%, 17% networking events, 67% LinkedIn, 17% company websites, and 33% referrals from colleagues. I'll turn it over to the panel now. What are your thoughts on this? Where have you historically gone to find your positions? And what are your thoughts? Annie, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure, I can start. So the answer to this question for me is it depends. And it depends where you are in your career, right? I think if you are looking to come into financial services, it's going to be very different, right? From someone who's already there and is trying to look for the next opportunity. Obviously, if you're already in the industry, you're going to rely on your former colleagues or your existing colleagues. And I think as Juan was mentioning before, it's not such a big industry, right? If you've been around a few years, people move around. You will know people at all of the many different banks that, within a 2-block radius of where I am right now. But if you're someone who, let's say, is transitioning from the military and you are trying to come into the industry, I think the networking opportunities or events are key, especially those that are industry specific and in meeting individuals. And also, one option that I didn't see there are a lot of organizations that specifically work to connect veterans with employers. So I know I currently partner with a few of them here at Standard Charter where we put together our own networking events, resume prep workshops, and simply lunch and learns type of events where people can come in and learn about the different departments within the company. So you're getting to connect with the companies, not necessarily on an interview, but actually from a meet and greet perspective. So those I think are very, very important if you're trying to break into the industry. Applying to LinkedIn is great, right? You never know if it's going to work, but sometimes it can be like a black hole where applications simply go out and you're not getting anything back. When you're sitting in a room and you meet someone and you can ask questions about what is your company looking for, what are the biggest challenges that you're trying to address right now, why is this position open, what are the type of talent or the skills that you're looking for. It's a very different conversation than simply sending a resume and hoping for the best.
I completely agree with you on that. I think especially when you're trying to break into the industry, the soft skills are probably even more important, than anything else. And being able to be inquisitive and meeting people in person, being a bit more proactive in that sense is of vital importance. Ryan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that or one.
Yeah, well, what I will say is that it does, and I'm thinking back to my journey when I first did this, it does take some detective work in some cases. But there are companies that are large enough that have people in them that are completely dedicated to hiring the veterans and working with them to get them placed. Usually they're at the larger shops. And just the nature of it is they have a larger recruiting or force within HR. That's one of the areas that I would suggest. Again, it does take a little bit of digging. You might have to start searching on Google or LinkedIn and trying to find those people. But some of those bigger financial companies do have those teams out there. And then they will be, and again, this depends on where you are. To Andy's point on networking, like anytime there is sort of a networking event where veterans are encouraged to go, a lot of times those shops will post that information and try to find where they will be, where their displays or tables will be at those different networking events. And again, like I said, it takes a little bit of detective work, but there are teams out there with companies that is their sole purpose is to hire veterans.
Yeah, and it's about seeking those people out. It's
Yep.
an excellent point from that sense. And Juan, anything in addition to that?
Yeah, all that to Ryan's point. I think he was referencing like the Veterans Pathway programs that a lot of the large financial institutions have. I was actually hired at JP Morgan because I went through the Veterans Pathway program. So like those are very good programs to make sure you're researching. And actually, in my case, the Veterans Pathway program reached out to me because I was a veteran and because I had tech experience, right? So it was key that I put that in my LinkedIn, right? I make sure that in my LinkedIn, they understand not only that I'm a technical professional, but I also bring a lot of those qualities that are, that I gained throughout my military career and experience. So the fact that they went and looked on my LinkedIn and reached out to me because I was a veteran and because I had technical skills, that was like the perfect combination of what they were looking for. So that I have to stress this, that like you have to invest some time in making sure that your LinkedIn clearly articulates all your skills. And a lot of the times when I coach veterans, they don't do a good job of like quantifying all the things that they did in the military and putting that on their LinkedIn. I had a situation recently where one of the veterans was in the financial sector, wanted to pivot to tech, and his only tech experience was the tech experience he had in the military 10 years ago. And I said, I don't care if you gained tech experience 10 years ago or 5 years ago or two minutes ago. What we need to do is make sure that on your resume and your LinkedIn, that's highlighted, right? Because you're not doing yourself a good service of not highlighting those skills, regardless if you gained them 10 years or not, you still gained them. So that would be a good piece of advice on my side. Make sure you're not looking at it just from like, hey, what have I done in the civilian world? Make sure you amplify everything you've gained on the military side, because there are recruiters out there that are going to be looking for people that have specific skills and military experiences. They do have a hiring quota of hiring veterans per year, right? So that's also a factor. And also, my last point, you don't have to start with a full-time job to get your foot in the door. I started with an internship. So my first job that was non-military, that was technical, was an internship that I turned into a full-time job. So right now, look at it from transitioning from the military, take those internship opportunities, because most of them, if not all of them, are paid now. There is no such thing as unpaid interns anymore. And also, there's a lot of programs that focus on apprenticeships, that focus on giving you the opportunity, even if you might not have a degree, but you have some good skills and they see some potential in you, they'll give you an opportunity through an apprenticeship, right? So like, start thinking outside the box of like, it's not just I go from the military and I have to go to a full-time job. No, there are other avenues that you should explore that'll ultimately get you that full-time job, but it might just take you a little longer. That's all right, because many of us have to do that, including myself. It took me longer to get the full-time job, but once I got the opportunity and once I got into the tech sector, like my career took off. So it's just making sure you think of it that way as well.
That's a really great point, Juan.
Right.
And if I can add, I was also hired through one of those veteran initiatives that at Standard Charter that was looking to hire veterans. And I also came in as a contractor. So my first 9 months with the bank, I was a contractor, and in a way it's your test period, whether an internship or coming in as a contractor it's a time for them to observe and see if you're someone that they want to hire full time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the LinkedIn point's a very valid one as well. Just on that one, what specifically would you advise people who are looking to get into the industry to put onto their LinkedIn? Do you mean specific certifications they've got? Do you mean to even include kind of, veteran on their LinkedIn profile? Could you mind just going into a bit more detail on that?
I would say all the above that you just mentioned, but also make sure that you're quantifying, right, like your experience in the military, because like I said, the facts matter, right? If you put in your LinkedIn that you manage 40 plus individuals in a very stressful setting, you were able to manage and control millions of dollars of assets and equipment, you led initiatives that resulted in cost savings, or you led initiatives that created efficiencies. All these things that I know many of my veterans do because I did them myself. Like, if you do not articulate them the right way on LinkedIn, like, you will not be recruited, because those recruiters are looking for these specific facts. And I think that, and I understand why we do it, because many veterans are humble and we, sometimes don't like to brag about what we've done or what we did in the military, but it's not about bragging. It's about just quantifying how much of an asset you are, right? And it's your job to show the civilian world all the knowledge and experience you've gained, because you are part of the 1%. You are fortunate enough to have done things that most people, 99% of people, don't do. You were able to manage people. You were able to work on projects that were impactful to the organization that you worked for and even our nation. You worked in stressful situations that most people never work in. So like, all these things have to be highlighted in your LinkedIn and in your resume, because once again, the only person that you're doing a disservice to is yourself. And that's one of the key things that we have to always amplify how much of an asset you are because you're a veteran. Remember, you're part of the 1%. So let everyone understand why that 1% matters.
Completely, yeah, and this leads really quite well onto our next point. Before we go on to that though, I know I think we've just had Karen join. Karen, are you there?
I am, and I apologize. I thought we had postponed it, but note to self, you got to pay attention to time zones. So I'll just jump in like the former paratrooper I am and support my teammates and answer whatever questions you present to me. My apologies.
No problem. You're all good. You're all good. Do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself before we move on?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. My name is Karen Rancher. I am a retired Army colonel. I started as a private in the 82nd Airborne Division, went to officer candidate school, became a logistician. I have 27 years of supply chain experience on a global scale. I excelled in that field, and I was given what we refer to as a nominative position. In the corporate world, it's called compliance officer, but the Army, we call it Inspector General. So that was my introduction to assess areas according to regulations and standards. And I was fortunate enough to leverage that and be selected for a program under the Chamber of Commerce called Hiring Our Heroes, where I joined the Next Generation program with Wells Fargo. And it's competitive. You don't automatically get an invitation or are hired by Wells Fargo. You interview, and then you're selected for the position. And I was fortunate enough in the middle of a pandemic to join Wells Fargo as a senior lead audit manager. I've served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, Operation New Dawn. And it was during Operation Inherent Resolve where I supported a 8400 task force under equivalent to a CEO, a 3-star general. That was my introduction to compliance, which the skill sets and the soft skills I learned as a veteran gave me the opportunity to transition into the financial sector. Thank you for that opportunity. And thank you for allowing me to join your panel.
Thank you very much for joining us, Karen. Yeah, it's great to have you on here. Yes.
Do you see what Karen just did? She just amplified all her experience and knowledge gained in the military and why it's transferable to the civilian world. What I just said, she just executed live.
Yeah, Karen, you missed what we were just discussing, but you pretty much.
No, I heard. I'm glad to support. I'm glad to support my teammates, and one is always amplifying the fact that there are skill sets that veterans bring to the table based on our experience: critical thinking, leadership, thinking on the fly, coming up with solutions, as opposed to, woe is me. Veterans bring a lot of skill sets to the table, and we take initiative to fix and identify solutions as opposed to complaining about problems. Not to say that people do, but serving as a veteran, regardless of how long, regardless of what service, that's a skill set that we learn and we have the opportunity to amplify.
Completely. That was a fantastic introduction for for veterans who are listening to this, who want an example of how to show the skills, that how can they translate their skills. So thank you for that, Karen. It was fantastic. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. What is most important when conquering the recruitment process? Karen, I'm not sure if do you want to tackle this one?
Okay, so for me, it's like a bullseye. You have to be honest with what your skill sets are. You're not good at everything. I think as a leader in the military, or not even a leader, a service member in the military, you're used to executing a myriad of skill sets or tasks that might not be directly represented or pinpointed at one particular area. One of the things that I had to realize is, where did I want to focus my skill sets and where did I want to enter into the financial sector? And even as I was in that internship program, the Hiring Our Heroes, I started with the job application process and even the recruiting at a large scale. Am I going to be a bank manager? Am I going to be an auditor? Am I going to be a business consultant? So I actually did it in action, in the sense of, what do you want to do? So you have to be honest in the sense of, when you have a conversation with a recruiter, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you're able to do? And as a veteran, hopefully you're planning 24 to 18 months in advance what you want to do. And you have to be honest in terms of, what is your skill sets? What do you bring to the table? If there is a capability gap, are you going to take a class? Are you going to get a certification so you could address that deficiency, so you can bring that skill set to the table? And think about it. If you were hiring yourself, what is it that makes you attractive to a prospective employer? And do you have the skill sets that they're looking for? And are you articulating that? I heard through your resume, and you think your resume is your paper representation of yourself. And then when you do an interview, do you articulate the how you do what you say you do? And what was the impact and the result and the scope and the scale when you're going through your interview process? Completely.
And that, for everyone out there, that's specific to each role, right? So before you go into an interview or you submit a resume, that could, your answers and how you approach that is going to be different for each role. Is that correct?
It is. You'll hear a lot of people say, even recruiters from different companies, because, for instance, when I desired and aspired to join Wells Fargo, they have what they call their train. Basically, they're going through catching the station wagon, and I wanted to hear about their culture. So for instance, one of the recruiters said, don't try to do that cookie cutter resume where you send in the resume for every position. I see Annie laughing. You can't use the same resume for every position. You have to tailor it to the skill set for that position. I think some of us, it is hard, or maybe we're being lazy. You have to look at what they're talking about in terms of desired qualifications, because the desired qualifications go beyond just the baseline. If you have all the desired qualifications, that increases your probability and the propensity of a recruiter wanting you. But then even when you get the interview, again, you can't do the cookie cutter and say, hey, I'm an audit manager. What is it that you do as an audit manager? Do you know how to do a VLOOKUP? Do you know how to take large data sets and make it relevant to an audit manager, in the sense that it's not just numbers and scenarios and risk management challenges? Put it and package it and tailor it in a way that is relevant, usable, and applicable and valuable to your team, your employer, and your supervisor. Just don't throw out data points that it's a waste of people's time.
Completely. Yeah. Don't just throw stuff and hope it sticks. Be specific and make sure everything's completely relevant. I love that. That's really good. Annie and Juan, is there anything else you'd like to add from your own experience to that question at all?
Yeah, I would definitely make sure you understand the institution and what they're trying to achieve, because probably in your interview they're going to be asking you, some technical questions specific to the role. So you should definitely know the role and cater the resume to the role, but also understand holistically what that institution is trying to do, right? What that department is trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, right? Understand the vision and the mission of the organization, because what will really impress a hiring manager is when you can clearly articulate what the goals of that organization are, how your work is going to impact those goals, and how you have the technical and non-technical skills to fulfill his or her need. At the end of the day, when I'm hiring someone, they're filling a need, right? And I need them to clearly articulate that if I hire you, you're going to fill that need and you're going to make my team that much stronger, right? So those are some of the things that you should make sure you keep in mind.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's about being clear, concise in your answers, and how you respond to questions is the general consensus I'm getting from anyone. Ryan or Annie, do you have anything else in addition to add to that?
Just one quick thing, Connor, when it comes to once you land that interview and you're in the room, I think something that veterans tend to do a lot is to use we language. So they'll say, we did this, we achieved this, my unit did this, instead of I did this, my direct contribution. And I think making that transition, it sounds very different when you hear it as a recruiter, because in one aspect, you're describing what a team accomplished, but you're not really talking about what was your contribution to meeting that goal. So it's important that during those interviews, you transition from the we to I language and you talk about what is it that you did as an individual? What was your contribution? What did you bring to that team to help achieve that goal or to make that mission a success? And I think that's the dots that needs to be connected for the recruiter to understand what are your skills and your abilities, what are your strengths, and what you can actually bring to their team.
Completely. And it goes back to a point we said earlier around veterans are generally pretty obviously very selfless, and it's about being able to sell yourself in an interview, right? And saying, no, this is what I did, which is of huge importance. But Ryan, do you have anything in addition to add to that question?
No, I know there's all great points. The only thing I will add here, and I can't stress it enough, is to portray yourself again as a highly trainable individual. And because there are, we could get a lot deeper into a conversation on specific roles, but a lot of times roles that are posted can be general in nature, or they have a specific skill set that might be kind of hard to find, and depending on who's in the market, right? And so if you could portray yourself as somebody that, again, can bring all of the things that the other panelists described, and you can train me in this job, and I'm good for your team, I fit your culture, I would hire you in a heartbeat, because I might not be able to find that specific unicorn out there, but if I could train somebody, I guarantee, and that's willing to learn, I will go for that person over anybody else.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was excellent responses from everyone there for that. We have one more question from the audience. So another really good question, actually. Most veteran apprenticeship programs require an EAS stay of less than 2 years. Are there other possible avenues for veterans to be seen by large financial institutions if your EAS date was later than that? This is a really good one, actually. And so thank you for whoever wrote this in. Does anyone have any comments on this or any answers?
So if I may, I'm just going to name a few. You have, for instance, Military Officers Association of America, you have 4-H, you have different nonprofit organizations that support veterans. I think it goes hand in hand with doing your homework, and they constantly having webinars, because I think the pandemic really was a pivotal moment in the history for humanity, that you don't physically have to be in a geographical location to seek these opportunities. I would say, think about your skill sets, think about the type of company you want to join, what size of company, whether it's small or you want to be a giant whale in a pond. Be realistic. Do you want a Google experience, or do you want a Booz Allen Hamilton experience? And look at times where that company is offering apprenticeships, summer programs, where they're open to veterans and they're veteran friendly, or even training seminars, certifications. Like, you think we have the International Association of Auditors, they're constantly having conferences where not only does it help you to learn about different skill sets within that financial sector or aspect of the financial sector, but it allows you to establish relationships so that when you transition your service, people know you're just not a stack of papers or resumes where, okay, I remember Karen, she was on the call with the stagecoach like 3 months ago. So when I reach out to that recruiter, David or Molly or whoever, they're like, okay, this person has this different skill sets, but she's really anxious and she's excited about coming to Wells Fargo, and help them get past the asset cap. I think someone mentioned knowing about the company, knowing about the culture, so that if there are specific challenges that that company is facing, you can match your skill sets and the idiosyncrasies of the skills that you present, and how you can help them get past that impasse or that challenge or whatever it is that's happening in that corporate culture or history. You can speak to it. And it shows that you're not just applying to a position, you're really excited about joining that particular company.
Yeah, completely. Doing that extra research, the networking, it all adds so much value from that perspective. I'm going to move on to, we've discussed a lot about demystifying the roles, role suitability, the road to employment. I'm going to talk about enhancing employability, specifically, I guess resumes and advice on writing resumes. I'm sure that's something that a lot of veterans in the audience have questions on. What would be your best bit of advice, potentially, Karen, on writing a resume?
Know about the level of positions, because I know within the Wells Fargo, there are 7 levels of the position. I came in as a senior lead audit manager, and it's literally in the middle. But one, educate yourself about the positions, what task or skill sets that's related to that position. I know for me, my son, for instance, he serves now, but we use jargon like airborne or AMC. There are literally 4 AMCs in the Army. Don't put AMC in your resume, because nobody who's not affiliated with the military is not going to know. Are you talking about Air Mobility Command, Army Material Command? To someone that has no association or affiliation with the military, don't use jargon. Don't use abbreviations. Tie what you did, the organization, to scope, scale, impact. What was the result of what you did? And one of the things that I used to do when I even wrote evaluations or my own resume, I would give it to my son or a friend that had no affiliation with the military, and make sure that the context and what I have in the within my resume or the document is free of military jargon, and they can understand it. And you think you might have it right, but okay, what is a battalion commander? To someone that has never been in the military, you are a executive in charge of a business unit. For me, 950 people. Okay, what did you do with the 950 people? Scope, impact, scale, and what was the result? Those are the things that really translate within a resume, regardless of your background. We got to speak English, and I had to reintroduce myself to not using jargon. Thank you for that question. It's a great question.
Yeah, it's something that's of vital importance. Making sure that everyone understands the resume is key. Juan, I don't know if do you have any additional points, Juan or Ryan, to the resume writing?
I'll give one point. This is just based on my personal experience of me writing resumes and then reviewing them. You want to make sure you capture the audience within the first half of the page, right? So like I always tell people, normally how we now review resumes, you're going to go through a system and we're going to try to see if there's keywords that we catch. Because then the pile goes from 1,000 to maybe 100, right? And then there's someone that actually reviews those 100, and usually it's the recruiters. And out of those 100, like the recruiter will bring me 20 candidates, right? So my point is that one, you want to make sure you have those key words, right? You want to make sure you don't have that jargon. You want to make sure you're articulating well, what specific to the role that you're trying to apply for, you can achieve. But also, I always tell people, if you don't capture me within the first half page, I'm probably not going to finish reviewing your resume. So make sure that first half of the page is amplifying everything that you bring to the table. The way I structure my resume, my first half of the page is a summary of my qualifications. I don't even start talking about my experience because I'm trying to make sure I capture you within that half a page. Because then if you're interested enough within that half a page, you'll finish reviewing the rest, and I'll show you all my experiences that I've gained. So my advice is make sure you understand that, right? And work to quantify your summary of qualifications to capture the audience of those hiring managers.
Yeah, all very, very valid points on that. I'm going to jump to something
Okay.
Go on, Ryan. Sorry, go on.
The only thing I'll throw in there is that what I've learned is that sometimes resumes, it's kind of like the fashion industry, where things that are important or things that look and feel in a resume, they change over time, what recruiters are looking for. And so if I'm thinking back to your shoes, when I was in your shoes, I reached through my network and I found somebody that was working in a company and they had hired a professional resume writer coach to help them write their resume. He graciously gave it to me. I took it and copied it, and that was my shell. But then, 5 or 10 years later, I'm looking around, they've changed the way that the resumes and what recruiters are looking for. So in some ways it's a game, but it is like this industry that keeps changing. So keep that in mind when you write it. And to Juan's point, keep your information relevant in the first half, but make sure it flows like what recruiters are looking for, and it doesn't seem outdated. That's all.
Yeah, all very valid points. Obviously, it's such a key point getting that initial resume writing right, because that's how you get the employer's initial bite from an employer, and make sure you get that conversation started, which is very important. I'm going to jump to we're coming towards the end now to networking, because I think this is something that we touched on earlier in the discussion. People really underestimate how powerful a good network can be. So the question really is, why is it important to build your network as early as possible? And do you have any advice for people who are looking to start networking or get better at networking? Ryan, I don't know if you want to tackle this one first.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Think of yourself just like any of these businesses that we're a part of. You are a brand, right? You are working on your brand and how you present yourself in your network, and how, regardless, again, and Annie talked about earlier, you're going to have to develop and build a new network. And as you do that, think about how you're presenting yourself, the skills that you want to portray, and how you're reinventing who you are in the civilian world and how you want to portray yourself to potential employers, but also people that might give you that, like Karen was talking, like who can pass your resume to the next person, right? They can vouch for you, and they might not have worked for you, but hey, you know, she seemed great. We talked. I really liked her. She's a cultural fit. Who can, you know, help you pass your resume along for just another conversation. So think of yourself as a business, you're building your brand. And when you go to these different types of networking events, keep that in mind and always look for, and don't make it feel fake, right? But make it so that you are, you know, you're a genuine person, putting yourself out there and keeping, you know, keeping in mind that this is the person that I want people to know and pass my name along when it comes to it.
Fantastic. Yeah, so vital. And also, I think remember that, you know, the other, whoever you're networking with, you know, is often in a similar situation, right? You know, in terms of everyone's in the kind of same boat. Karen, is there anything else you want to add to that? Karen off one?
I would say you want to bring authenticity. Don't articulate that you could do something that you can't do. I think for me, like I start off with my introduction, and I'm a retired colonel. I love the fact that Ryan said you're starting fresh. So when I started, first of all, I started loosening myself or separating myself from the identity of Colonel. And I've always been Karen. Other people have seen me as Colonel. So one of the things that I think was very important is when I went into Wells Fargo, people did not know that I was a retired officer or even what rank I had attained, because it's a new chapter in your life and you're basically starting from scratch in terms of building your credibility, people seeing your competence. So you know, it's wonderful to meet you. My name is Karen, and I think the conversation and the dialogue starts there in terms of what you are capable of and bring it to the table. And I can't emphasize enough the power of authenticity. Leave the rank and titles behind, because now it's a brand new chapter.
Fantastic. Yeah, and the it can be so powerful, networking as well. Juan, anything in addition to that?
Yeah, what I would add is when it comes to networking, like be open to networking in various capacities, because networking is one of those things where it might not pay fruits in the beginning. It might not pay fruits this year or even next year, but trust me that it pays fruits in the long run. Two of my last jobs that I've gotten in leadership roles have been because of my network and because of the recommendations and the relationships that I've built throughout the years. So look at networking as a marathon, not a sprint. And also like leverage the power of recruiters. There are armies of recruiters who specifically focus on hiring veterans and focusing on hiring particular individuals for the financial sector. I have an army of recruiters that I work with, not only to hire folks, but when I want to look elsewhere, right? So, you know, apply the law of numbers. If there's 10 recruiters that are working for you to get you a job, plus your networking, plus you're applying on LinkedIn, it's a numbers game. I tell people all the time, it's not a matter of can you get a job, it's when you get a job. And so, but you might have to get 20 no's before you get that one yes. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. I need everyone to realize that.
Oh, and if I could jump in on what Juan said, it really starts with don't approach networking as an immediate payback. Think about it about building relationships and creating your reputation within the industry and bring energy to the table. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but I'm an introvert. I draw energy with silence, being by myself. But you can't tell anyone that I'm not the life of the party, so to speak, or never met a stranger type personality, because you want to be engaged when you're networking and bring that energy to the table, like you're present in a sense of mindfulness, like you really want to be there.
Completely. Yeah, completely agreed. And some really, really good points on networking. I think this is something that's been a theme throughout the webinar, and it's an absolutely vital importance, because it can be something that's challenging for someone who's not done it before to really learn. So I think that should be really useful. The last question from us before we wrap things up here: what's the most important lesson you've learned about working in the civilian world since leaving the forces? Does anyone want to start off with one final point? Karen, Ryan, off one.
I joined Wells Fargo in the middle of the pandemic. One of the things that I realized is people appreciate someone that identifies solutions. I mean, I realized that in the Army, but I think it was amplified that employers like it when you bring solutions to the table. And I think managing time well. I think I didn't realize how important it was, but when I went to my audit director, if I said I needed 2 minutes or 8 minutes, I needed 2 or 8 minutes to either let him know something he wasn't aware of or to give him a summation or update of something that was critical. I think time management and the skill sets that I learned in the Army, they were important, but the applicability had an exponential benefit, and it touched the organization in a different way. So I think one of the things that I learned is there's a certain type of apprehension as you're going into something new. But I would say the thing that I learned is the skill sets and experiences that I learned as a veteran really helped me, not only in terms of learning a new job, a new field, but just the things as a service member. I really learned to appreciate the value of the experiences that I learned while serving.
Fantastic. Yeah, of vital importance. Ryan, what would you say the most important lesson you've learned is?
So mine, it's a sort of an internal look. It's priorities, and I'll give you an example. When I first got out of the military, I joined this consulting group, and it was a retired officer, and he sat me down in the very beginning, and he gave me the speech, and he was like, "Look," and it didn't really hit until recently. There's 3 things that you kind of have to really internalize when you're looking for a civilian job, and it's the job itself. Are you going to like the job itself? Are you going to feel fulfilled? The second one is the location. Is this the place where you want to live or you want to work? Not everybody can be remote. It's very fortunate. So think of that as well. And the other one is compensation. Like, you can't get around it. It's comp. Is this the what you want to get paid for the job? Can you live in that space and in order to feed your family? Right. And so once you get a job with all 3 of those, that's a very, very special job. But sometimes you might have to sacrifice one of those or 2 of those to get it into a shop and land in there, and then work your way through to that job that gets you all 3. And so really understanding what you prioritize most. Is it comp? Is it location? Is it the job? Once you figure that out, it really starts to help direct your focus and where you want to apply and the companies that you're going to look for.
Figuring out motivations completely. Yeah, it's a vital important, something we always try and dig down into as recruiters as well. What one last from yourself? What's the most important lesson have you learned since being in the civilian world after leaving the forces?
I think I've learned 2 key lessons that have made me successful. One is the fact that I have to accept and acknowledge that I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room most of the time, but I will always live by, I will be the hardest working one in the room. And so my hard work, dedication, and discipline will always get me where I need to be. It might take me longer. It might be a harder road, but I will get to where I need to be. So one of the things that I've learned is to accept not to be the smartest one in the room, but be the hardest working one in the room. And the second thing that I think has made me successful is realizing that failing is acceptable. Failing fast is the mentality and methodology that I live by now. So failing fast means like acknowledging the fact that you're going to fail, and it's not the failure that matters, it's the lesson learned that really matters and what's important. So by basing my life on those 2 kind of factors of not being the smartest one in the room, but being the hardest working one in the room, and understanding that failing is acceptable, it's really the lesson learned that's the value. Those 2 things have made me successful. And so I think if you apply those 2 things, anyone can be successful, because there's nothing special about me that has made me successful. It's just that I've applied those 2 principles.
Completely fantastic. And failing, everyone fails, right? But you're right. It's completely about learning from those mistakes. Fantastic. Well, appreciate we've run slightly over time here, so that's about it from us here. Thank you very much for everyone for tuning in, for sharing your morning, evening, or lunchtime with us, and thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your insights. You've all got great stories, and hopefully we've provided some value to some veterans out there who are looking to make a transition. I'd also like to thank the Trinova marketing team, Lucy, for helping put this together. And hopefully you can join us on our next webinar. And those who want to continue the discussion further, follow our community on social media and reach out to me directly if you want to get involved. We're always looking for companies to sponsor in-person or panel events, as well as hiring managers who we can facilitate introductions to for our veteran community. So yeah, I really appreciate your time. To find out more about Ex-Military Careers, please visit our website, www.ex-militarycareers.com. But for now, we'll see you all soon, and thank you very much again.
All right, thanks, Connor.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.